And I'm joined today by my colleague, Creative Loafing Editor-in-Chief Ray Roa. Good morning and happy Valentine's Day, Ray.
I love being here with you, Mitch.
I love it too, and also want to have a shout out to a happy birthday to one particular listener out there. Hey, so on today's show, we're going to speak to a Tampa-based reporter who has recently exposed the fact that the city of Tampa spent tens of millions of dollars reimbursing the developer of the Water Street Tampa development for infrastructure expense, and another $60 million for expansion of downtown cultural attractions. Yet it's going to take another 75 years to pave all the streets in the city of Tampa. Fran Gilpin from the Florida Trident will be here to discuss. But first, joining us in the studio to discuss all things going on in the city government of St. Petersburg is City Council Member Lisette Hanowitz. Councilmember Hanowitz, welcome to the Skinny.
Well, thank you for having me, Mitch. Happy Valentine's Day. I came over the bridge just for you guys.
She loves us.
We really appreciate it. Absolutely. It's great to see you here. And a lot to talk about, and we will obviously talk about the whole situation with the Tampa Bay Rays baseball stadium. But we're going to get into that in a few minutes. Because there's so many other things going on. And I know, frankly, I think some listeners, some St. Petersburg residents, which I, of course, am one of them, kind of almost resent the fact that the Rays issue just dominates so much of the news. It's understandable. There's so much money, taxpayer money involved here. But my gosh, we've got a lot of things going on. Let's talk about, if we could, first, this whole thing with the water billing system. Yes. I know lots of citizens have been coming forth to complain they're receiving utility bills that are way out of proportion, sometimes to the extent of thousands of dollars. What can you tell us about that? What's going on now with that?
So basically, we found out, just to step back real quick, the utility billing is dealt with in the administration. And we can't direct, obviously, those that work.
Mayor Ken Welch's administration.
That's exactly they work under the mayor. And so they give us information. The first time we got any memorandum on it was late January. My district didn't have a lot of the billing issues. I got some, but you don't know how pervasive it is until you start hearing, right, on social media and from others that it's not just a couple of people. Then you start hearing it's happening everywhere. And so on social media, I started seeing more issues come up. We got the memorandum. We had a conversation at City Council about it. And we're trying to get much more information from administration regarding the issue, and we scheduled a committee of the whole next Thursday in short order to allow them to give us more information and also see what we can do on a ordinance level, meaning the billing department can only provide credits under certain circumstances, and that's provided by ordinance. And so, for instance, if there's a leak on the property, if you're filling your pool, right, you get a one-time adjustment. So there are different things under our laws that can allow for a credit to be issued. And then there are certain times, whatever. But the issue is that some of these issues don't fall within that criteria, and that's caused some problems. So you have they're limited by what is on the books right now, and we're going to see as City Council how we can remedy that and allow more discretion and more flexibility. I think it's unprecedented, and I'm also not clear as to why some of these issues have happened, because obviously there was flooding in many neighborhoods, and whether that caused issues with the meters, and every situation, my understanding is very different. So they've been working through those issues, but I completely understand the frustration that people have with utility billing, especially because there are people that have automatic payments.
Yeah.
And so you have a bill that comes in normally for $200 how something, it's a,
And you're not even aware of it until you look at your statement.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So I can absolutely appreciate and understand how upset they are. But those that are interested about it, we are going to have a committee of the whole meeting next Thursday about it. And you can tune in. It starts at 10:50. And you can watch St. Pete TV, watch it live, or actually, if you don't want to watch it live, it's recorded, and then you could go back and watch the recorded meeting.
Why not 11? Why 10:50? Okay, anyway. All right, also, now I know, and we don't know, right, how many people have actually been affected. I think Tom Green, who's the assistant city administrator, told you guys, last week, they're still looking into that.
That's an issue. And the issue I had is, okay, isn't there a way to find out in our system if there are certain bills that are spiking and what the issue is. And my understanding is there's obviously limitations with whatever the system that they have and getting the information. So we are doing some upgrades on our system. But yes, I would. Yeah. You would figure that there was a way where you could figure out who was affected, what are the normal bills, and all of a sudden these bills are over X amount, and how can we determine that? And to find a root cause.
Right. Another big issue that has emerged in the last few days is this report, because I wanted to ask you about all the efforts after Helene and Milton, certainly what the city of St. Petersburg is doing, because so many properties, of course, were affected by Helene specifically. So we're reading now that city officials have opened up nearly 11,000 code enforcement cases on properties that may have been damaged by last year's hurricanes. But the key word is there is may have been.
Right.
The city says it's doing it as a proactive measure to keep track of whether the properties are repaired properly to protect current and former owners. But a lot of property owners are questioning the priorities of the city leadership. They say that energy should be put towards issuing permits for repair work or at least accurately identifying damaged properties. And this is, again, a story that Colleen Wright from the Tampa Bay Times reported on earlier this week. She reported that residents have not received notice of the open code enforcement cases, and some say their flagged properties suffered no major damage. Others worry that open cases will make it harder to sell homes by putting a permanent black mark on these properties. Whoa, what's going on here?
So we just had a report yesterday on the codes issues, and I have to say, I wasn't really aware of what was going on. The majority of the properties that have been flooded are outside of my district. I had some flooding in my district.
District for our listeners?
My district, just so everyone understands, includes Old Northeast, all the way to Meadowlawn. So a lot of those neighborhoods that are just east of 275 and north of downtown, that's kind of my district. And east of me, like Snell Isle and Shore Acres, none of those neighborhoods are in my district. Right. Meadowlawn had some flooding. There was some flooding, by Coffee Pot in Old Northeast in that area. But I was very lucky. Our district was lucky. It's just in higher ground. But I will say that, they advise us about the codes issues. I think part of the problem is communication. Okay. There should have probably been from administration and from the codes department, and they acknowledged this at the meeting yesterday, that they should have been much more proactive to explain why they were doing this. Meaning, frankly, they should have probably gone to the neighborhood association, had a meeting, and called a special meeting. Yeah. So that way it wouldn't catch people off guard, and people could ask questions as to why and understand the process. So my understanding of it, codes opens up cases all the time regarding any issue. That does not mean that you have a violation. Mm-hmm. That means that they're looking into something. So it doesn't necessarily mean it's a black mark, right? So there's a codes case open, somebody complains about something, they open up the case and they can close it. You would never know about it. So with this, the reason they have done this, my understanding is because they want to make sure that they're complying with FEMA regulations. There have been counties, I think Lee County was one of them, where they got in trouble by not actually enforcing their ordinances and making sure that people were getting the appropriate permits for the work. And if you don't do that properly, you could lose your community rating system discounts, which means there are discounts that you get, so you pay less for flood insurance. That's a really big deal. You could be put on probation by the National Flood Insurance Program. So the city has been working hand in hand with FEMA to make sure that they have processes in place so they could check the properties, make sure the people that had damage are doing the things that they're supposed to do, so that way they are in compliance. That's the goal of my understanding of all the program, what they're doing. But I can absolutely understand the other side of it, because all of a sudden I heard there's 10,000 cases. What's going on? And I think that's more of a communication issue.
Sure.
But they're working through it, and the goal is actually to protect the property owners at the end.
We want to tell our listeners, again, if you're just tuning in right now, it's 11:16 here on 88.5 FM, The Skinny. We've got St. Petersburg City Council member Lisette Hanowitz here in studio, and we'll welcome to hear from you, the public. The telephone number to call in, 813-239-9663. You can also send us an email at dj@wmnf.org. I want to, of course, get into. Let's stay with this issue about the storms.
You kind of alluded to this, and everybody recovers from a storm. There's so many factors at different speeds, right? And you talk about your district where some people, maybe it's like they're okay now. But when you look around, there's still people living in not in their home, in trailers. How do you talk to your constituents about the role that they play in the overall recovery of everybody across the city? And how do they view kind of their place as St. Pete recovers? I was talking with a Katrina survivor earlier this week, and she was like, it feels just like Katrina, it just takes forever. But for some people, their lives are back to normal now. What do you tell those people?
Well, I am always going to the neighborhood association meetings and obviously being in touch with all the neighborhoods in terms of what are the issues. Meadowlawn was one of the ones that had flooding. And I will tell you this. I went through Hurricane Andrew. I was in Miami for Hurricane Andrew, and I was one of the people. I lived in Miami proper, just under Miami International Airport, that area. And Hurricane Andrew hit Homestead. There was a huge difference between the damage in Homestead, which, by the way, was leveled.
Right.
And where I was at. I was in a concrete, duplex, with the regular jalousie windows. Believe it or not, none of my windows broke, but it was 3 hours of terror. I would have never imagined the damage that happened in Homestead. And by the way, that was not months. That was years of recovery. There were tent cities. You could not find landmarks. The military came in. So what I try to do for our community is give them context of what we're dealing with and understand this is bad. There are people that were okay. There are people that are still suffering. And guess what? It could have been also a lot worse. And I think it's important for people to understand we suffered a lot. But we could have had a direct hit and there would have been 10 foot of storm.
That's the crazy thing about Helene. It was so far away.
Right. But Milton, we could have had 10-foot storm surge. That would have been horrific. And you think about our sewage plants, right? Our wastewater facilities. And they're usually in low-lying areas because that's where the water goes. So 10-foot storm surge hitting a plant like that,
you
can take out a plant for not just a few days, for a while.
Well, that's what was controversial about in Helene, because I lost my water for a couple of days, and we didn't learn about it till the day of the storm.
Right.
That was not good.
That's back to the communication.
I agree with that. So we go back to communication. I agree with you. I was not happy when they took down the wastewater plants. I found out maybe 2 hours before they said they were going to take it down.
It was kind of shocking.
There was a press conference, and I'm like, why am I finding out? This is half of my district.
There was press conference, and earlier in the week, and they were asked about that, and the officials did not say anything about we might have to do this. And then the day of the storm, hours before the storm came, they said we might have to do this, and of course they did do it.
Right.
And it made sense to do it, but please tell the customers, the residents.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm with you on that, and it goes back to what you were asking me before. I think it's important to communicate with residents so they understand their risks, so they understand what they're dealing with, because you don't know what their family situation is, and so they may decide, I'm not going to stay here. If the sewage plant has to go down, I may leave.
Right.
They may have family somewhere else where they can leave and they can make that choice for themselves. And so one thing that people learn, I've lived my life, in Florida, dealt with hurricanes. There are a lot of people that move here and have no idea what to expect, no idea that they're not going to have electricity and what that means for their life, no idea that the sewage plant could go down or the water system could go down because there could be leaks in the system. We had trees that fell down, then the pressure goes down, they can't supply the water. I mean, so there are all these variables that can happen with a storm. A crane came down, the drop roof came off.
Yeah.
And people, I think, once they go through it, I think they start realizing, I need to be prepared myself. You can't just wait for government or someone else to take care of it. You have to also be ready. There's a reason why they tell you, fill the tubs with water and all these things. And back in the day, people would do that and would not even have half the information that we have about hurricanes now. We used to plot it. You used to pull out that thing in the newspaper and plot it out.
If Instagram doesn't tell us to do it, we're not going to do it, guys.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, you mentioned Miami. Let's talk, listeners, a little more about you. Of course, again, we're speaking with Lissette Hanowitz, City Council member since 2021. Now, because of the extra year, by the way, you don't run for re-election this year. Is that correct?
Right.
Till next year, 2026. Yeah. Okay, you all get extra
got a
year
big smile on her face,
because the electoral system's changed there in St. Petersburg. But you are Miami, grew up in Miami, is that correct?
So I was born in Tampa.
Okay.
My parents came in the late 60s during the freedom flight from Cuba. Born in Tampa General Hospital. My mom and my dad got divorced, and I ended up in Miami. My grandmother was there, so I was raised by my mom and my grandmother in Miami. And then I went to law school at University of Florida. And after law school, life brought me back to the area.
You were a U.S. attorney, worked in the U.S. Attorney's office for a year.
I was a state attorney.
Yeah.
First.
Okay.
So I was the state attorney in Pinellas County. And then I was at the U.S. Attorney's Office.
A quick question about that. And federal government, Donald Trump administration is doing a lot of stuff when it comes to everything with our federal government. But also, there was a concern I heard. I don't know if you want to weigh in on this, because this area, the January 6th demonstrators or rioters, whatever you want to call them, we had more in Florida than anywhere. So the FBI opened up 2 offices. One was in Tampa and one was in San Francisco, because there's a lot from California too. There's concern that the U.S. Attorney's Office over here, because a lot of these people, they prosecuted these January 6 folks, that now, Pam Bondi and Kash Patel are going to come after them. I don't know if you have any friends that still work at the U.S. Attorney's Office over here. Have you heard any words about that?
I do have friends, believe it or not. I do not keep in touch in terms of what's happening in specific cases, and I would probably never comment on a specific case. I will tell you that whatever's happening, it's been, obviously, politics plays a role into it. If there was a trial and people was found guilty, they're supposed to serve their time.
Right. Okay. We've got one caller, and then we're going to talk to the Rays, because obviously we need to get into that. This caller is not going to give us his or her name, so that's fine. We'll. I think they're on hold here. Let's see here. Is this going to work here? Hi. Hello, caller. You're on WMNF.
Oh, yeah. Hey, this is David in Tampa.
Oh, hey, David. Okay.
Hi.
Good morning.
Scared me.
One thing I just wanted to mention that I feel like is a loss for St. Pete is the demise of the Skyway 10K, which I hope is temporary, but I know it's because of Tropicana Field, being damaged. But I was curious if that might get revived next year, if your guest might know.
I have no idea. That's something recent that's happened, and I have not received any additional information regarding that.
Yeah, I think it's going to go gone virtual. But that's part of those things, right?
What does virtual running mean, by the way? I'm a runner, but what does that mean? You go on Zoom and you run with your phone? I mean, what does that mean?
Yeah, I think you track it, and then they mail you your medal and stuff like that. And those are all those little things that kind of change in your life as we recover from things and things change. It's still crazy to drive around St. Pete. I was there earlier this week, and that pole on the corner of I think it's near the Publix at the Trop, where it's bent over, and it's surreal.
Well, but all the piles are gone. Okay. Yes, it took a while, but they're all gone. Okay, let's talk about the Rays. Let's transition now. Obviously, this still remains front and center in the news here in St. Petersburg. So we have new news, of course. If you've been following Stu Sternberg, Matt Silverman, the Rays president, was on WDAA 620 yesterday. I guess it was a recorded comments, but he talked. Okay, so we know, and we've been following this, obviously, I think most of our listeners, the latest saga, and some of this had to do with the storms, actually, in terms of the Pinellas County Commission delaying a vote in October to issue the bonds out for the stadium. Of course, the county commission's liable for $312 million, I believe it is. The city, $287 in direct costs, and then millions more for infrastructure costs. And we should tell the listeners that we begin this part of the conversation that you were one of the members. We had Richie Floyd on here earlier, who also voted against the deal. Wait, why don't we start there before we talk about the comments by Matt Silverman? Why did you oppose this deal when you voted? I think it was July. I think it came up. Why were you a no on that?
So various reasons. I will tell you that a lot of times when people hear, well, you voted against it, you're against the Rays, and that's not necessarily true. Bottom line is, when you look at a deal, what do? You look at the business terms and you look at the legal terms. The majority of people out there haven't even read the contracts. I had people come and meet with me to try to lobby me for the deal. And I'm like, have you read the terms of the deal? And they haven't. Because it sounds great. Yes, keep the Rays. Okay, well, what does that mean to our city? And so when I started going through the contract, there are lots of issues with it. Number one, you have the business side of it, whether or not, we should be paying $300 million for a stadium. And it's not just the $300 million for a stadium. It's the taxes that you forego on the stadium land, because you're not charging them any taxes. So what's the cost analysis to that, right? And so the opportunity costs, if you develop that land, versus having a stadium in it. So yeah, there are things that a stadium brings and all that, but then you have what? You have the land around it. That's 65 acres of land. And it was appraised, what, $279 million. And that was then. I don't know what the value would be appraised now, but then we sell the land for $105 million, right? So it's at a discounted rate. And then we're putting $147 million or something like that in terms of infrastructure. So we're putting in infrastructure and we didn't increase the value of the land. So you're getting land, paying for land less than the money that we're paying in infrastructure in the land. And you're not paying the $105 million up front. Have we seen a penny? No. It's $50 million that they're paying us in 12 years' time without any interest. Who gets that deal? So $50 million in 12 years. The net present value of that is probably like 30-something million. It's like $38 million. So you think
it's a bad deal for St. Pete City taxpayers?
So I have to look at the terms of the deal, and then you look at some of the legal terms. And I will tell you, there's assignment provisions where they can assign it to anybody without city council approval. This was after I could not approve that. The other thing at the meeting I asked for was financials. They would not give us financials. Wouldn't it be nice to know, at least for us to have known their financials? We entered into agreement with Hines Historic Gas Plant Partnership. Do not have a partnership agreement. We don't even know who the partners are. How do you enter into an agreement with someone that you don't know who the partners are? So these were all details that to me are important. Now, here's the thing. It may not be a big deal, but now look at where we're at. Right. You don't know when you're going to end up in litigation or in disagreements with your partners. And that's the issue. These agreements are supposed to protect us. And this is not a one and done. The land part of it, that's 30 years. So these are people that are going to be part of it. One of the things that they mentioned was, well, Hines is a reputable developer. There is nothing in the agreement that requires Hines to be part of it. Nothing. They can absolutely sell. We don't know who the partnership is. You can't. They can't sell part of their partnership to someone else, and who is controlling it?
Councilmember, let me interrupt you right now. So I'm sure you made some of these arguments during the many discussions.
I honestly feel like I'm watching you on the dais because you and Councilman Floyd were so clear about these things. And, you never resorted. I never felt like you were screaming at anything. You were so calm and clear about your concerns, and you voiced them very clearly in your votes.
Yeah.
And making these very relevant and truthful statements here, yet your colleagues, all in good faith, opted to go another way. The majority of them, I should say. But so where we're at, and let's go where we're at right now, and that is, so there was these comments made yesterday by Matt Silverman, or it was published yesterday. I guess he said them a couple days ago. He's very critical of the county, but then even criticizing the city. So first he talks about the county. He says they effectively broke the deal and turned their back on the commitment that they had made to us in August, he says. So everything that's happened in the ballpark front since October has been a result of that failure, the county commission's failure to complete its approval, because they voted on in December, or they didn't vote on in October, and supposedly this has screwed everything up. And then later in the show, he said, quote, financially, we were really extending ourselves with this ballpark project. It wasn't a question of having the dollars. We've had the financing secure, but more a question of, does this investment itself make sense in the context of Major League Baseball and fielding a competitive team for the next 30 years? He goes on, we stretched because we really wanted to do this project for us and for St. Pete and for Tampa Bay, but when that timeline slipped and when the cost went up, and really when we lost the support of our partners at the city and the county, when they said to us, not one more cent after they didn't uphold their end of the timeline, that's when the reality started sinking in. Now, he wasn't apparently asked in this interview, well, what does that mean for you now? They've been to be really cryptic recently with these comments. Same thing with race owner Stu Sternberg. What do you make of these comments?
We only have 30 minutes left.
Exactly. So, first of all, let's start with the fact that these are sophisticated businessmen, okay? They have top lawyers. If they had a date where things had to be done by, guess where it would have been? In the contract. There was nothing binding us to approve the bonds, okay, exactly that meeting in October for the county commission. Nothing. As a matter of fact, they knew that they could not bind a future council to approve the bonds. They knew that going in. So the idea that this was going to be a deal killer, and by the way, the bonds are approved. They still have things that they have to complete by March 31st. So you're going to tell me that 1 month delay is going to kill a deal that's worth how much to them? I'm sorry. I'm just not buying it. And it's so easy to go and blame someone else for the issues. If there are financing issues or any financial problems, it seems to be on their end. Because at the end of the day, last time I checked, even though I voted against it, the bonds are approved. And also the contract says the cost overruns go to them. That's so exactly they're complaining about the cost going up. It's not a new revelation. I know Ken Welch has been more adamant about it because he knows people are coming back looking at him. He said, not 1 more cent. No, not 1 more cent. As you mentioned, not only 200 in whatever's 87 in direct costs, but also over $100 million in infrastructure costs. Yes. What is so roughly overall? How much is the city of St. Petersburg, if this goes through, spending here? So bottom line, when we take out all the bonds and we borrow it, at the end of the day, with borrowing costs, it's going to cost us like close to $700 million. By the time we pay off these bonds in 30 years. Now, here's the thing. Another reason why I was not happy about the business side of it. When you look at the projections in terms of what we're going to make from the development, from ad valorem taxes, from real estate taxes coming in, and they're like, but we're going to get all this land developed. The projections for 30 years is $475 million. So you do the math. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out we're paying out how much with costs, and we're getting in $475 million. So, we are invested in this, and I understand I was on the losing end of it, but the city is putting in a ton of money. So is the county. And not only that, the land, that's 65 acres of land, prime land in downtown, and no one is going to tell me that land is not going to be developed. Please tell me where, close to a downtown, 65 acres of land goes undeveloped. Yeah, you're talking almost about new wounds, right? And I'm thinking about this movie, Raised, that is supposed to come out in St. Pete. And we haven't talked about the old wounds of the gas plant and things like that. St. Pete is a city that's really an active municipality. How do you think a film like this, Raised film that's going to come out, how do your constituents respond to it? And how do you think this will affect what goes on? Well, I haven't seen it. Okay. So, but I will tell you that at least I know from the constituents, they do care about the history and they do care what happened, to everyone that was displaced there. And they want to see something good. I will tell you this, getting a promise to get an African-American museum and putting conditions on them getting the money, that came from the race. You want to give us $50 million in community benefits? Give it to us in cash. How about that? Don't take a discount on the land and then pretend you're giving us $50 million. We're paying that money. The taxpayers are paying that money. And I have no doubt that our community would do something without a stadium to make sure that we built a community that was the right community for that area and made sure that we could give back. If you're just tuning in right now, you're listening to Skinny here on 88.5 WMNF. We're speaking with St. Petersburg City Council member Lisette Hanowitz about the situation with the Tampa Bay Rays. In a few minutes, we're going to bring reporter Fran Gilpin in to talk about the city of Tampa. Going to go your calls right now, going to Jeff in St. Petersburg. Hi, Jeff. Good morning. Good morning. I have a question about it seems the Rays issue is sucking the life out of any other thing, but the seawall along the waterfront of St. Pete and the St. Petersburg Municipal Marina don't seem to be getting any attention at all. Can you comment on that? Sure. So one of the issues that I brought up, and even thanks, Jeff. Thank you for that question. One of the issues that I brought up during the conversation about the stadium, and I think what people don't realize is if you put money to one thing, that means those monies aren't going to other things. And look, people love to put things in buckets, but at the end of the day, that is taxpayer money, and that money will go to take care of other things. So you're putting in a stadium, you're not putting in other things. I'm in the Public Services and Infrastructure Committee. I'm the chair there. I had the city do a presentation of all our needs for the city, all our infrastructure needs, and it's in the billions. And so when you talk about seawalls and you think about the damage to seawalls, my understanding is for the last numbers I heard was like $14,000 a foot for a seawall. And we're still waiting to get a seawall vulnerability study to see what it is that we have to repair in the future and what those costs may be. But believe it or not, the majority of the walls, the seawalls in the city of St. Petersburg, aren't even public. They're private. And then how do you deal with that? And how do you deal with sea level rise? So they just repaired from the storm, there's the seawall that was damaged by Vinoy. Right across the hotel. And I will tell you, that was in the millions of dollars, just that piece right there. And you're talking about the marina. The marina issue is going to come up. We're still waiting from administration to get the proposal that's is going to be brought forward in terms of the marina and what's going to happen to that. And that's also going to be an interesting conversation, because that is also a very expensive endeavor. So I agree with you. We have a lot of needs. We just had a conversation about the sewage facilities and making sure that we harden those sewage facilities, and the amount of money that's needed for the sewage facilities in order to harden them and raise the electrical equipment and all that. So if there is storm surge, it's not affected. So, I agree with you. I would say if you're interested in the seawall issue, please, you can always contact my office, and I can also make sure that whenever the seawall vulnerability study comes out, we can get you that for you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, let's go to another caller here. Hello, caller, you're on the air. Is the proverbial caller there? All right. No? Okay.
I think Irene's still talking to him.
Oh, okay, right. Okay, so how do we want to do that?
So I ask a quick question, because I know we want to get Fran on. How much anxiety do you have on a municipal level about whether or not any kind of federal assistance or funds? How much are you guys talking about that? And I know you guys can't talk to each other or anything like that, but what's the community on top of everything else?
That's a fantastic question. So our storm costs were $250 million. And $125 million of that was debris. We still haven't received all that money. We're supposed to get FEMA money. Right. So imagine that. $250 million costs. We were told that the majority of that we should be getting
100%, right? If you got it done by a certain time.
Well, the debris for sure, but we still have other costs that are associated with the storm that are not debris related, and not everything FEMA reimburses. I was told that a lot of the costs we would see coming back, besides the 125. So imagine if we don't, and the hit to our city that it would impact us in terms of our budget. Seeing,
right.
We're at $250 million.
Wow,
that's the last count.
Wow. We want to make sure to get. Okay, Jerry's been waiting patiently. Jerry, you're on the skinny.
I have. So guys, you know what I haven't heard in.
Okay.
Thanks, man.
All right, Jerry.
Sorry, guys.
Mad
Still
about,
can't cuss on the radio in this country. It's crazy.
Sorry. We're going to switch. Okay. So, council member, hang on here. We're going to pivot now and talk about the city of Tampa. Okay. We're talking about city government. We're going to stay over here in Tampa. Fran Gilpin is welcome. Hey, Fran, good morning.
Thank you so much, by the way, Councilwoman, for joining us.
Oh, you
hang out.
Well, we'll get back to the council member. She's not gone yet. Fran, you're on the air.
Welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
So Fran Gilpin, let's tell our listeners, is a longtime reporter in the Tampa Bay area. I got to know Fran. I'm almost 25 years here in the Bay Area now, Fran. And I remember you working at Creative Loafing as an editor. And I did
James Howard was so thrilled to see your story in the paper this week.
For the record, it was called the Weekly Planet at that time.
Now, what did you tell me more about your journalism background? What were you before even the Weekly Planet / Creative Loafing?
I worked for the Tampa Tribune for about 12 years. Towards the end, covering Tampa city government, Hillsborough County government, and a little bit of school board too. So a lot of local government type issues.
And then you went on to ABC 28 as investigative producer.
Yes, I did a little time in TV as well.
And now you're at the Florida Trident, which is really exciting. And it's always great to get new journalism happening here in Florida, because we need it, of course, with the diminution, frankly, of the Tampa Bay Times here locally. So this is doing investigative reporting here, and you wrote a story that came out last week. It's about the city of Tampa, and it was basically about the CRAs, which are community redevelopment agencies. Tampa has 8 of them, actually: Channelside, downtown, East Tampa, Ybor. You wrote about the one in basically in I guess downtown, right? Because we've seen like Water Street, Tampa, which I guess is called, people call it Channelside, what have you. It has blossomed. It's become this incredible area here. But a lot of public money has gone to that. It seems to me like, all these developers are doing boffo business, as they would say. So what's going on there with that?
Well, it's funny that you mention that, because one of the things that got me interested in the subject was I didn't realize how much money had gone into Water Street in particular. I went back and looked at some of the media coverage in the mid-teens when this was all going down, and there wasn't much coverage of specific numbers. There was the fact that there would be some subsidies, but it's turned out to be a magnificent project, and it's also generating along with some other development in downtown, a tremendous amount of property tax revenue, projected to raise maybe $500 million worth in the next 8 to 10 years. And then you look at some of the longstanding infrastructure problems that Tampa has, along with St. Pete, and there, it doesn't seem like the city is putting as much money into keeping the roads and the sewers and the pumps working. So we kind of explored that a little bit in the article.
And we know this, and I've known this for decades. I think the same thing is true with St. Petersburg. I mean, like the pipes, basically, like they're old. Like every city in America is dealing with the situation here, and it's this basic infrastructure. I think you said in your story, you're quoting somebody, the dude who runs transportation or whatever. That's
Vic Bede.
Yeah, it's going to take 75 years to get pave all the roads. Is that correct in the story?
That's what they said 3 years ago. The city is now saying they're not quite as bad as that now, but they didn't really have an estimate for me on how many years you got to wait. But that's a long time to wait for and expect a road to hold up with traffic and rain and all the stuff that we get here in Florida.
So the thrust of your story basically is the city is, with taxpayer money, is doing a lot for certain areas and is really ignoring a lot of other areas.
Well, legally, the money is supposed to be tied up in that CRA area that's raising
or TIF, right? Tax increment funding, right? Yeah.
We tried to avoid that term in the article as much as possible. But yes, as development within the CRA area happens, it generates more tax revenue, and that kind of surplus money is supposed to stay in that particular area.
So is there thoughts, and I know we had, Councilman Bill Carlson was on the down early before us here, and I know when I covered Tampa City Council, has been very adamant about getting rid of the CRA for the downtown area. Like, does it really need it? It seems to be doing pretty well. Ideally, you want to do that for areas that need it, like East Tampa, like Drew Park, like even Ybor City, frankly.
Right. Yeah. I mean, Bill, for a number of years, probably at least going back 5, has tried to either put a cap on it or do away with the downtown CRA altogether. But there's other folks on the city council that feel that these CRA areas are supposed to deal with slum and blighted areas. And some people feel that there's still sections of downtown that are slum and blighted. I mean, Water Street, the restaurants there are putting out $40 entrees and $20 glasses of wine. It doesn't sound like slumming it to me, but in the north part of downtown, there's vacant storefronts and that sort of thing. So they'd like to keep the CRA and keep working to try to develop those areas similar to what's happened in Water Street.
Reading your story, Fran, you have the voices of so many people, residents and neighborhood leaders who come to the dais every week.
At the Tampa City Council?
Yes, like, for instance, Stephanie Pointer is in there. And these people are out here just combing through these endless documents all the time, advocating for their neighborhoods. And I know your story didn't really dive into it, but how much do you feel the presence of developers in dictating how that CRA money, lobbyists, in terms of how that CRA money gets doled out? And because when you look at the neighborhood, they don't have a lobbyist working for them, right? But there's always a lobbyist working for the developer. So I know it's not in your story, but how much did you feel the presence of lobbyists and their influence in these discussions?
If you've been around Tampa long enough, you remember in the 80s and 90s, Tampa, almost the official slogan of the town was America's next great city. And there's a lot of people, particularly now, if you fast forward 30 or 40 years, who feel that Tampa's starting to reach that kind of potential, and there's a momentum going, and we got to keep it going. Some of the folks in the neighborhood are kind of wondering, as they sit in traffic or their streets start to flood more than it used to after the high rise was built down the street. They're kind of wondering, how great is it to be in America's next great city? And I think there's a tension there that's going to, I think you'll see play out maybe in the next election. I think there's probably a lane for a mayoral candidate who wants to, if not put brakes on some of this stuff, at least reconsider some of the priorities of city government the last couple of administrations.
So I want to, first of all, this is a fantastic question. It goes back to what I was talking about downtown St. Pete and the TROP and the development. That's a CRA area. They extended the CRA that was one of my issues. They extended the CRA for 10 years. That CRA in downtown, where the redevelopment's going to happen, was supposed to sunset in 2032. They extended it. Why? To pay for the bonds for the stadium. What happens is with that money, and the last time I made the calculations, that extension of 10 years, and they're funding the CRA at 50% of the tax revenue going in, that money was about $230 million that you're keeping there in downtown, which, by the way, most people would agree, St. Pete downtown has thriving.
Yeah.
That money, just like in Tampa, does not go to the rest of the city. It would go into our general fund. What is a general fund? It could be used for general things.
Right.
Police, fire, streets, everything else. And so we have the same issue over there with the downtown CRA, and that contributed to the TROP, to the redevelopment and the stadium, because that's money that they're using to build the stadium.
Again, you're just tuning in right now. That was the voice of Lisette Hanowitz. She's a city council member of the city of St. Petersburg, and also Fran Gilpin, reporter with the Florida Trident, talking about financing taxpayer money, where it's going to infrastructure of our cities, and talking about our great cities of St. Petersburg and Tampa here. We do have Scott on the line here. I think he wants to ask maybe a question to the council member. Scott, you're on the air.
Good morning.
Hi.
Listen, I have a question, and it might be stupid, but they told me there's no such thing as a stupid question. We were talking about seawalls a while back, and what can the Army Corps of Engineers help with any of that stuff? If not, why not? And
well, there's no stupid questions, because the reality is most people wouldn't know that, but we own the seawalls, just like there's private property owners that own the seawalls. So, if you have a seawall on your property and you're responsible to repair it, I think that's where it lands.
Well, okay.
Okay, Scott, thank you for the call. So, Fran, back to you on your story. So, going back to your story, you write about critics are fearing a giveaway to developers is underway right now in the CRA's West Tampa zone. Earlier this year, the City Council approved $10 million in CRA funds to assist with a Riverwalk extension on the west side of the Hillsborough River. And I've seen former Mayor Bob Buckhorn, who was a big champion of the Riverwalk, as certainly Mayor Castor, as Mayor Iorio, because it's been a decades-long project. But some have criticized this as being like a little, a nice thing to have, but like there are needs going on in other parts of the city. I've seen that happen, be discussed in recent weeks in the City Council.
Well, it's always kind of tough to determine where the legitimate help that goes to a developer who's interested in boosting a CRA area starts and ends, and what is just a straight subsidy to a developer who is going to be building there anyway. And I think sometimes in Tampa City government they lose the distinction between those two things. In St. Pete, it seems like in downtown, a lot of the growth has been more organic than in Tampa, where it seems like a lot of development downtown had to be subsidized with tax dollars.
It reminds me, council member, that I've heard this again. We've seen the explosion, and you've been in St. Petersburg for how long now?
I moved to St. Pete in 2006.
Okay, yeah, I've been here I've been in the Bay Area since 2000, but I saw. To me, it was around, I don't know, I was thinking about 2009, 2010, maybe it was earlier than that, where St. Pete really started happening. So it's nothing new at this point. It's been going on for at least 15 years, this renaissance. Beach Drive really emerging. You always had Central Avenue, and then you have all these different districts, all these arts districts, what have you. Do you get the same thing? Because, again, I've heard this in Tampa for years, okay, too much attention to downtown, not enough to the neighborhoods. You must hear that in St. Petersburg.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you hear from neighborhoods, there's all this investment happening in downtown and what's going on in the rest of the city. A lot of attention in downtown. Why is everything in downtown? And I think, absolutely there are valid points made to that. My districts aren't in downtown and they're cool neighborhoods. Just like every area has cool neighborhoods and they bring something special. What makes a city special? All the neighborhoods, all the cool culture and the people that make those areas. And it happens a lot of times organically. Sometimes they can develop it, but a lot of it really happens organically.
And you were a neighborhood association president.
I was.
Yeah.
That's how I got into politics. This was not my husband's early retirement plan. He did not expect this.
It is. I love when that happens because you go to these neighborhood meetings and you say, man, that person should run for council.
That's what happens.
And then there they are.
That is what happened. So that historically is what happened. I've seen it in this area for 20-something years. Because that is politics at its most basic.
Look at the councilwoman Hurtak. She's serving on these boards, these crazy late night boards where you sit here and you listen and you approve like an A-frame sign on a sidewalk. And these are the people that really care about stuff. Fran, I'm curious. Obviously, I mentioned that our longtime publisher, James Howard, was so happy to see your name back in our publication. And obviously, you're working for the Florida Trident, which is this great new model for news where you're sharing news, also the Florida Phoenix. And it really helps a newsroom like ours because we don't have those same resources that we used to. You guys both literally used to work at the place I work at now. Are you going to keep writing about Tampa for the Trident? How this pitch happened? Are we going to see some more reporting that's locally based that has statewide implications from you?
I think you probably will. One of the contributing editors at the Trident is Tom Scherberger, who used to work at the Orlando Sentinel, the Tampa Tribune, the Tampa Bay Times, St. Pete Times.
Had a Tuesday show here.
That's right. Yeah, some of the listeners may be familiar, but I think he's going to be interested in trying to fill some of the gaps. I mean, the Times has obviously shrunk a little bit in terms of their newsroom personnel, so I think we're going to try to not duplicate what they're doing, but try to explore some issues that are not being covered or maybe underreported. And we encourage people to get in touch with us at FloridaTrident.org if they have some concerns or things that they would like to see the media cover.
That's great. And going to you, a council member, the Times, one place they haven't really cut back is covering St. Pete, which is their home city, although they're not officially the St. Pete Times anymore. Colleen Wright does a great job there. Some of the things we've even mentioned today have been stories that she has reported on. In fact, going back to the night of Hurricane Helene, which I believe was a Thursday, I'm going to say. But I was stunned sitting there at my home that night looking on my phone because her story posted, I think, a couple hours earlier, talking about where the water was going to shut down. And it said, it's going to be, north or whatever, east of 275. I'm like, oh, my God, I'm in this neighborhood. And apparently at midnight tonight, it's going to shut down for the weekend. And so thank God that, we had that local reporting there. And I believe that you appreciate, the press more than ever.
Oh, I will tell you, and this is just from going to law school, democracy is based, to me, on an educated populace, and that people need to know what's happening. And you also have to keep leaders, including myself, in check.
Right.
You have to.
Accountable.
And that is what our journalists do. And I think they are such an important part of how we prevent misinformation, and how now, I don't know what's happened in media where people are just watching the things that they want to watch, only listening to things that just reinforce their views. And they can't have a conversation with someone who may see a different point of view and kind of hash it out, just like it used to happen. it's good to have different points of view. You don't want everyone on city council to agree. I don't expect every vote to be unanimous. That's how a democracy works, and it's okay. And it's just the way how you go about that discourse that matters. But I think the services, I think the Tampa Bay Times and what you do here and what you do, I think it's all extremely important to make sure that people are engaged and involved, because the decisions that we make affect their lives, much more so than sometimes what happens in D.C.
Oh, of course. And now you've been, like I said, the council. You got elected in the fall of 21, so you've been there for 3 years. You've never been in public service in this respect before. You were doing neighborhood association. So what's that been like for you, working with 6 other individuals, trying to come to a common good, if you will?
It's difficult sometimes. It really is. And it's hard because the way I analyze things, I go back to my attorney way of viewing things, just like I did with the raise deal. To me, it wasn't about politics.
Yeah, I think that really came out, watching it, like you mentioned, Ray, watching you on the dais when these discussions were happening. You looking at it from an attorney point of view, which is looking at the fine print, which is critical in a big contract that goes on for so long and has so much public money involved in. Yeah.
So that's important. But then I can also switch and understand, the issues and the nuances that happen in terms of neighborhoods and balancing development. And that, my experience as a neighborhood president, allowed me to understand the dynamic, making sure that you get the input from the different stakeholders in the decision making and in the policy making part of it. So I understand that part too. And I also can't get lost in the details sometimes. I have to be very careful to not lose people when I get into the details of something.
You're very good at translating the legalese.
I try. I try, but it's hard. And you want to make sure that people understand and kind of get something that's complicated or a complicated issue and make it simpler. I can do that because I was a litigator. So when I was a prosecutor, you kind of use a keep it simple, stupid method, and you try to do that. But it could be challenging. But I think it's an asset for me. I also have to go through a lot of information, and kind of when we get our binders with all that information that we have to vote on, I can kind of narrow down the things that I need to focus on and what's important. Those skills are important.
I want to say before we go on, we have about a minute and a half left here, is we're talking about the media, kind of a little pump up for next week, Ray, if we could, because next week WMNF will be doing a fundraising drive. Nice pivot here for that. But we haven't done it. It's been since September, October. It's been a long time, actually, relatively speaking, 6 or 7 months. No, or 5 months. But anyway, so next week we'll be asking our listeners, hopefully being our regular listeners here, to ask for a financial contribution to keep us going on the air. So we want to get to that in your mindset for next week. Fran, before we let you go here, again, you've been doing media for 30 years in this area? So
a while, yes.
Yeah. So how would you assess where we're at right now? Like I said, obviously the Trident, a big addition here, hopefully, to local reporting, because as the council member says, and I agree with this too, I cover state government. I mean, D.C., man, we can try to cover. People follow that stuff more than ever now with the sensational things coming out of D.C., but really what is happening here in our Bay Area and in Tallahassee does have an effect on our daily lives.
Well, I think other media outlets have to step up. WMNF has a very fine news staff here, WUSF, and some of the TV stations too, and I think they have to pitch in too and try to cover the issues that the Times no longer is able to because of its financial situation.
How long were you doing TV news for?
About 8 years.
How'd that go for you overall?
I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
It was, I worked with an investigative unit, so we tended to look at more in-depth stories. And it was interesting making the transition from print, but I have a lot of respect for people in the broadcast media.
Me too, after I did it for 3 years at Bay News 9. Okay, Ray, I think that's it.
Fran Gilpin, thank you so much for joining us. We'll link to that article on the WMNF blog. Councilwoman Lisette Hanowitz, thank you so much for driving over that bridge.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
On behalf of myself, Ray Roa, Mitch Perry to my left, Joe Remo on the board today. We miss you, Skip Sassy, Irene Matthews on the phones. Thank you so much for listening to WMNF Tampa today. We'll be back next week with the Fun Drive. E-Love is in Studio One, going to give you some art in your ear. Thanks for keeping us on air.